Most people think retirement is a math problem. Save enough, withdraw 4%, and you're good. But we really need to be honest with ourselves. There's a world where you follow the plan perfectly and still run out of money. That fact is why most people live in fear in retirement. The reality is the biggest risk in retirement isn't return, it's timing. And if you get that wrong, even in the first couple years, it can permanently damage your future. That's why I sat down with Dr. Phau, an economist and college professor who spent his entire career studying retirement income. And what he lays out challenges a lot of what traditional advisors and mainstream gurus teach. So in this video, we break down why the 4% rule isn't as safe as people think.
My first study in the financial planning space was, did the 4% rule work in other countries? And the answer is it worked in the US, it worked in Canada, but that's it. It didn't work in any of the other 18 countries in the data set.
It actually failed.
Yeah.
And why including alternative products like annuities, life insurance, and reverse mortgages can actually better protect your portfolio, give you more control, create a lasting legacy, and even allow you to spend more in retirement without the risk of running out of money. We also went through some of the biggest takeaways and findings from his brand new book that just came out. And for the true life insurance nerds out there, we have a very special announcement about a brand new speaker we're going to be hosting at the 2026 Life Insurance Summit. Let's dive in. My producer just told me something wild. Only 6% of you who have subscribed to our channel have enabled notifications for our videos. That means 94% of you watching right now won't get told by YouTube when we upload a new video. So whether you're brand new or one of our longtime subscribers, if any of our 1,000+ videos have helped you think differently or brought you value in any way, I'd love for you to hit that bell and turn on all notifications. We've got some incredible guests and conversations planned for 2026, and I don't want you to miss them. Thank you so much for supporting this channel, and I'm excited to keep growing with you. Dr. Phau, welcome to the BetterWealth Show.
It's great to be here. Great to be back.
I had you on 5 years ago. I was a baby YouTuber. I probably had 2,000 subscribers, and we got thousands of views on our video. I was really intrigued because life insurance doesn't have that many academics in. You had a PhD. You wrote a book that's like a massive on your academic research, and you're also very involved in wealth building cornerstones and what they've built. So I was fascinated by your story, and it was an awesome conversation that we had. Since then, you've written multiple books, I believe. You're just coming out with a brand new book, and I want to help promote it. So we'll make sure that link is down below. Make sure if you've gotten any value from my show, this episode, Dr. Phau, make sure to go support him in getting his book and reviewing it. But I'm glad to have you back on and excited to talk about all the things in the academic world, how life insurance integrates into retirement planning, and there's probably a lot more subjects that we'll cover as well.
Sure. Yeah. It's great to be here. It's great to be back. Great to meet you in person.
Yes.
Yeah. Have this opportunity to talk all things retirement income.
All right. So let's talk about all things retirement income. I'll hand it over to you. You're talking tomorrow. What have you been looking into as it relates to this space?
Yeah, I mean, for the conversation here, I've been working with the Wealth Building Cornerstones team. They created software that shows how integrating investments alongside insurance can really help enhance retirement plans. And so they brought me in to take a look at what they were doing, and it was really intriguing. I started from the investments world. I've heard other people kind of the same story, where just looking at investments or investments only as the approach for retirement, but really how insurance can enhance that using the power of risk pooling. The idea of pensions, that we don't have so many of those anymore, but being able to recreate those through annuities, potentially using life insurance as part of that, either to back the annuity or just as a buffer asset or a volatility buffer, where when the markets are down, to protect your portfolio, being able to distribute from your buffer asset, the cash value of life insurance in this case, it's really intriguing and can really lead to improved retirement outcomes. And it's really just a matter of, you have to think about all your assets together. Yes, there's a cost to using something like life insurance, but by being able to strategically draw from that, you protect having to draw from your portfolio, and you can protect your portfolio during periods of market volatility. And then that lays the foundation for the improvement for your portfolio more than exceeds the cost of the insurance, so that you pay the loan balance and you still have a net windfall, a legacy, bigger outcome, stronger potential retirement outcomes at the end.
A PhD is not easy to earn. And so talk to me about how you even got into the subject of retirement. Talk to me about like what you went through. And I'm sure when you first started, you didn't know what you know now. So when you first started your studies, what was your intention? What did you have any biases? And then talk to me about the research that went into actually getting your PhD. Like how would someone get a PhD in retirement income?
Well, so my PhD is in economics, and actually, because I'm really old enough that there were no PhDs in financial planning yet, the first one started in the year 2000
Okay.
at Texas Tech University. So now there are PhDs in financial planning, retirement planning, but that's still, I'm too old for that.
Okay. All right.
But yeah, in economics, I was looking at Social Security, and specifically President George W. Bush had the idea of creating personal accounts for Social Security. And that was at the time I was doing my dissertation. So I looked at how those might work in practice. And it became the foundation of what I do today, which was effectively writing computer programs to test different strategies. With personal retirement accounts, it was the idea that you carve off part of the payroll tax from Social Security and invest it in like an individual retirement account type environment. Part of it would stay with the traditional defined benefit style Social Security, and just looking at how that might work in practice. So it's really the same thing I do today, which is comparing investments, comparing insurance or risk pooled based approaches for building income streams in retirement. And yeah, I learned quite a bit. I mean, at the time, I was kind of mixed that, well, this kind of policy of carving out part of the payroll tax to
Hmm.
create an individual account, it could work, might not work. I mean, it really depends on what the markets are doing. But since then, I've really come to see more that people do need some sort of reliable income at the very least. And right now, Social Security is the reliable income source that most people have. And it probably would not be a great idea to at least take away Social Security, because in reality, people may want more reliable income. And that's where to do that today, it's with insurance, life insurance, annuities,
Yeah.
to be able to build those additional reliable income streams to work alongside investments
So, what was your original dissertation on?
on just the performance of personal retirement accounts, that idea of Social Security,
Okay.
just carving out part of the traditional benefit
Okay.
into an investment account.
And so from there, how did then you get into this space around researching different ways, like getting connected with wealth building cornerstones and learning about life insurance and annuities? Like,
Mhm.
was that something that you learned in your studies or did that come after the PhD?
It came after I finished my PhD. I became a professor in Japan.
Wow. There you go.
And that was a university that was had master's program for government officials from emerging market countries. So I was doing a lot with pension systems in emerging market countries like Thailand, Vietnam, Pakistan. As I was getting ready to move back to the U.S., that was not really marketable for the U.S. So I started studying more about just studying for the CFA exam, looking at more of financial industry type opportunities, and then fell into the idea that 4% rule of retirement income. I had a data set that had market returns for 20 different countries. And my first study in the financial planning space was, did the 4% rule work in other countries? And the answer is, it worked in the US, it worked in Canada, but that's it. It didn't work in any of the other 18 countries in the data
Like it
set.
actually failed in
Yeah,
other
yeah.
countries?
And there's big differences. I mean, in some cases, if a country experienced a hyperinflation, generally after they lost a world war, you get extremely low numbers that really we can't do much with. But there are plenty of cases, like Australia is an example where they're one of the few countries that had higher average stock and bond returns than the US in the 20th century. But just with the way the volatility played out during the stagnation in the 60s and 70s, 3% was the highest number for them.
Meaning, another way to say that is if they withdrew 4%, they would actually run out of money. And
Before
that's when you
the
say it
end of
doesn't
the
work.
Yeah, that's the 4% rule says you could take 4% in year one, sustain that with inflation adjustments, and your money would last for at least 30 years
And
in the worst
you're
case.
saying in some of those countries like Australia, that wasn't even the case.
Yeah, only in the US and Canada. If you invested in US markets or in Canadian markets, it worked. In the other 18 countries in that data set, you would have run out of money before 30 years in at least one historical
And
case.
so when you looked at that, was that intriguing to you? Where you're like, I want to learn more about that? Or were you like, I feel like we can beat this? Like what was going through your mind when you were learning about the 4%
Well,
rule?
yeah, it was intriguing to me to the extent that, yeah, I thought this was relevant. There's all this faith in the 4% rule, and it really is based on the 20th century US market returns, which is a pretty phenomenal century for any country at any point in history. And maybe we want to be cautious about that. I didn't know what the alternatives were yet, but then I started hearing more about, Well, yeah, I mean, you don't only use investments. So why don't you take a look at annuities? And so I started doing research about annuities. And then after that, it was really with the Sangers, with Wealth Building Cornerstones. They said, okay, now you've looked at annuities and you found positive results. You should also look at life insurance.
When they first mentioned life insurance, you're academic, you understand economics. Did you have a negative stigma about life insurance, or were you neutral when it came to life insurance?
At that time, I probably leaned a little more towards neutral, or at least not positive, not necessarily overly negative, but I suppose to the extent I had thought about it, I had at least probably bought into the idea of the buy term and invest the difference, that if you need life insurance for the human capital protection, term insurance is the way to go. And the whole idea or point of that research was, if you start thinking ahead about retirement income, maybe there can be a role for permanent life insurance. And I hadn't really thought about that before.
Okay, so that you're neutral, maybe semi more pro buy term and invest the difference. And then what made you like in your research, because you also write about reverse mortgages, which may be more hated than permanent life
Yes.
insurance. And then annuities, I would say they're probably the most loved out of the three categories, but there's a lot of people that make their whole living just, down talking annuities. And so definitely, I wouldn't say your status as a human grew writing about these three things. It's
No.
not like you're like, wow, you became more cool. In fact, you probably became more not cool by doing this. But talk to me about, if there's one thing I know about you, it's all based on data. Talk to me about like how you came to this conclusion in your research.
hmm Right. And right. I get a lot of tomatoes thrown at me because I'm writing about unpopular things, but
Yeah.
I'm just going where the research leads me. Uh, yeah. And so what was it? I was going to say something.
The reverse mortgage,
Oh, yeah.
annuities, and life insurance. Yeah.
Well, right. Reverse mortgages have exact parallels with life insurance, and the concepts, the idea of the volatility buffer, I actually really learned about first on the reverse mortgage side, but then realized life insurance had already been talking about those same ideas for 10 years prior to that. So
Oh,
that made it easier to follow. Yeah. And it's really about the sequence of returns risk, that when you're spending from investments, if you have to spend during a downturn, you can dig a hole for yourself that's hard to recover from. And so being able to look at something outside the portfolio that can help manage that risk, that's where the reverse mortgages fit in. It's the same conversation. That's where life insurance fits in. I use
yes.
the term the non-correlated asset. It really just means you have something you can draw from that's not going to decline in value when your portfolio's down.
Hmm.
So you can temporarily spend from your other volatility buffer, the life insurance or reverse mortgage, give your portfolio a chance to recover, and then when you resume taking distributions from your portfolio, you haven't dug that hole for
Right.
yourself. And then it really becomes a matter of, yes, there will be a loan balance due. There's a cost. And if you just look at it in isolation, the cost can look high, but it's the synergies of managing that sequence of returns risk that if I had just spent from my portfolio, say with the 4% rule, and my portfolio was down to zero at the end, then it's kind of game over at that point.
Right.
But just making up purely hypothetical numbers to give the idea, if I could have drawn from the life insurance in 2 or 3 of the years,
Yep.
that allowed me to not have to spend from the portfolio. Maybe the loan balance on the life insurance, I mean, just to purely make up numbers, it's $1 million.
Hmm.
But then by being able to strategically not spend from the portfolio in those cases, the portfolio ended up being worth $1.5 million. So I pay off the $1 million loan balance. I now have $500,000 left over that
Yeah.
I would not have had before. And
Yeah.
that's the idea. And that's what the research on both the reverse mortgage side and the life insurance side consistently shows, that intuition actually works out. And
Hmm.
especially in scenarios where markets aren't doing
Were
well.
you the one that came up with that concept of volatility buffer, and like, is that your research, or
Mm,
did you find that from someone else?
I found it from someone else.
Okay.
Yeah, I did not create the idea.
Okay.
I learned about it first on the reverse mortgage side. There were a
Okay.
couple studies published in 2012, two different studies that year that looked at the idea of a reverse mortgage as a buffer, volatility buffer.
Okay.
Um, Now, I don't think there were any studies from the life insurance side, like published academic research studies, but they had already been talking about the concept before
Okay.
then. I know I've learned in hindsight.
So if someone's, listening or watching this, and, people like Dave Ramsey have said like, hey, you should easily be able to take out 8 or 9 or 10% because you're accounts are averaging more than 12. And so if someone's like saying, "Hey, my average rate of return in my portfolio is way more than 4%. Why is 4% potentially risky?" It's most likely because of, taking money out and losing is like a double negative. When you're growing your money and the market goes down, you can invest at a discount. And so we call that dollar cost averaging. And so going up the mountain is fine. Like volatility in fact creates sales to be able to get greater returns. But how does volatility works exact opposite against you when you're taking money out? And so in some cases, you'd easily be able to do 4, 5, 6% and be totally fine in a perfect world, especially if you're not losing money up front. But in some cases, like you're mentioning, when you run different scenarios, if you retire and then the first year or two are down, that can be devastating to your financial outlook. Is that Did I explain that well? Is there anything that I just want to understand the problem of like the 4% rule? And if someone's not doing proper planning, the 4% rule feels very inefficient, but that's their insurance policy for not doing right planning. Is How did I articulate that? And anything that
Uh-huh.
you would push back on or correct in what I
No,
said?
no, I maybe just expand upon, but
Okay.
nothing to correct. I mean, the 4% rule is quite inefficient because it requires you to be overly conservative just to protect against worst case outcomes. The sequence of returns risk idea, you can see it. The historical data gave us the 4% rule. It was if you had gotten the market returns with a 50-50 asset allocation from 1966 to 1995, over that 30 years, you could have just spent 4%. If you got in the average market return over that 30-year period, so every year you got the average return, you could have spent a 5.7%.
There you go.
It's the order of returns. And what happened was in the late 60s, and then especially in 73 and 74, you had inflation, you had significant stock market downturns. Now, 1982 happens in year 16 of that 30-year period. And after 1982, markets do great. 1982 is actually the best case retirement year from the
Yeah.
perspective of how much could you spend. The best case begins halfway through the worst case. But that's the sequence of returns risk. If I'd been spending from my portfolio since 1966, I still have half of my retirement left over 30 years from 1982. Markets do great.
Hmm.
But my portfolio has been so decimated by that point because I've been spending from it that I don't get to enjoy that great market performance
I
in the
see.
second half of my retirement. I'm already on the trajectory to the worst case in history, despite half of my retirement happening during the best case in
I
history.
see. I see. I see. Okay. So it's very, yeah, I think it's important that we understand the problem. And then now let's talk about how reverse mortgages, annuities, and life insurance all play a role. Is there another thing that I didn't mention, or these are the three things that you really talked about in your original book?
Well, alongside investments,
Okay.
but
Yeah,
yes.
and yeah. So I see investments as like the go-to, and
Uh-huh.
then
Well, you can enhance.
annuities, life insurance, and reverse mortgage are all things that you can supplement or integrate into your investments to make it better.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
if in your own words, I would love to hear how each one of them work. And do you have a favorite? So is it all three of your kids and you don't choose favorites, or do you have or do they work all well together? Talk to me about that, and I'll just let you like just kind of pontificate on the three different asset classes as it relates to how they integrate with investments.
Yeah, no favorite, and really the ones to use depend partly on circumstances of what's available. Now, the annuities can always be available. Life insurance, you do have to be insurable, and it helps if you get started at least 10 or 15 years before
Hmm.
you're wanting to really utilize it. Reverse mortgages, you do need to own an eligible home.
That's right.
So if you can't qualify for life insurance or if you don't own a home, then those options are off the table to begin with. But beyond that, there's not really one that's going to work best. And the annuities can work alongside the the life insurance or the reverse mortgage. With the reverse mortgage as well, there's the 10-year payment option. It's not exactly like an annuity in the sense that if you leave the home, the payments would stop, but it is like the annuity in the sense that as long as you remain eligible, staying in the home, paying property taxes, you'll receive those monthly payments for as long as you're in the home, as long as you're potentially alive, even if that goes beyond the borrowing capacity of the reverse mortgage.
Mm.
So it gives you that risk pooling element like an annuity.
Yep.
So they're all options on the table. And no, it's really hard to
I
pick one
see.
as a favorite.
The what makes life insurance unique though is you have a permanent death benefit upon your death, and so that can create a backstop. Do you want to explain, like, some people call it a permission slip, some people call it a backstop. How, in a planning standpoint, how is having a permanent death benefit paying upon your death? How does that actually help you while you're alive?
Mhm. Well, the one context there with probably the covered asset strategy of wealth building cornerstones, you can really think about like if you're a married couple, one way to get life insurance is you buy a joint life annuity, an annuity that pays while both, as long as at least one of the two people is still alive. Well, if you have life insurance on one of those people, you can now get a single life annuity and you'll get a significantly higher payout rate.
Mm,
And then you can really think it's covered asset because the life insurance, if I have a $1 million death benefit, I can get an annuity for $1 million. And then that death benefit, you can't use the term refunds my premium, but that's kind of how it works in practice. And then that creates flexibility. If my spouse passed away before me, then there's no need for another annuity. But if the spouse is still alive beyond me, they get that death benefit. They could buy a single life annuity for themselves,
right.
or maybe at that point they don't need it, but they have that flexibility and optionality. And that's where the life insurance it's the covered asset strategy. It
Yep.
covers what I put into the annuity, and it potentially allows me to get the annuity with the highest payout rates, single life. If we're talking about income annuities, life only, but just really what's going to give
Yep.
me the most spending power out of the annuity because I don't have to worry about life insurance in the context
Yes.
of protecting
Well,
spending for the
and
spouse.
a joint annuity is a form of life insurance,
Hmm.
if you think about it. And
Yeah.
most people do that because they don't want to leave their spouse or partner high and dry if something happens to them. But if you already had that death benefit lined up, it allows you to potentially spend more while you're alive, which benefits both people, but make sure that you're continuing to have the legacy element passed on. So I think that I think we need more people to understand that. As why do you think in planning and typical planning and a lot of fee only and fiduciaries, why do you think there's such a negative stigma when it comes to life insurance, annuities, and reverse mortgages?
Well, I think there just can be a distrust, and each may have different reasons. The annuities, a lot of complex annuities out there that just with the tax code, annuities started getting used more for tax deferral rather
Mm,
than for lifetime income. And then the idea of lifetime income starts to get obscured, and we kind of lose focus on what the annuity is really meant to do. With the life insurance side, I think so much of it is there's an element of costs for the insurance, and there's an element of you should really be thinking about this as part of the fixed income allocation in the portfolio. But I think in investments, it's always well, stocks are going to beat the life insurance, and okay, maybe they will, but
yeah.
does that mean you don't own any bonds either? You really have to think about comparing the life insurance to bonds rather than to stocks, and treating it as part of the bond allocation or the fixed income allocation in the
In what you
portfolio.
know about life insurance, is there any reason that bonds are better than a properly structured whole life insurance policy that give you almost bond returns, but other benefits in the contract, like a permanent death benefit, living benefits, maybe better creditor protection? Like, in your opinion, is there still a reason why someone would get bonds over life insurance? Like, should they have both? Or if someone has a properly structured life insurance strategy integrated, do you think it could fully replace bonds?
Mhm. Well, there may be reasons to hold bonds outside of funding the spending goal, but if we're talking about, say, I want to fund $100,000 a year for the rest of my life, and that's the goal I want to be able to fund. That's where there's really no role for bonds in that. I can either use stocks because then I have the potential for growth over bonds. Of course, there's no guarantee for that, or I can do more of an insurance based approach, annuity, life insurance potentially backing the annuity, or even being structured more. If it's structured more as policy loans, that might get more complicated.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
at least the annuity and life insurance is really going to be much more powerful than bonds for supporting a spending goal over an unknown time horizon. It really calibrates to my life expectancy, that I can spend at a level as though I'll live to my life expectancy. Because if I don't live that long, the life insurance offsets the annuity. The annuity didn't pay as much, but I get a better quote unquote return out of the life insurance. If I end up living a very long time, the quote unquote return from the life insurance isn't as good, but I've got a lot more annuity payments, so I get that better
That's right.
return out of the annuity. It balances it
It very much
and
does.
calibrates, to the life
Interesting.
expectancy. Whereas bonds, I just have to spend less to account for the chance I might live well beyond my life
That's right.
expectancy. They don't really offer anything to manage longevity risk for a retirement spending goal.
If I'm not going to do the covered asset strategy where I'm annuitizing some of my money, maybe doing single pay, having a death benefit to make sure I'm covered that. So if I'm not going to do that strategy and I'm going to do the volatility buffer, where the volatility buffer is any year that the market, goes down, I don't have to spend while it's down. I can tap into an asset that's not correlated to the market, let it recover. I can by default spend more and have the same certainty than if I didn't have that. What is the ideal number of years of income that you should have at 65 if you want to optimize, be able to optimize
Uh-huh.
your ability to spend?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's really hard to plan for in practice because if you're assuming a fixed rate of return on the investments, it's easy to calibrate everything.
Yeah, you're
But
right.
as soon as you deal with the world of randomized investment returns, the better your investments do, the more you can spend, and then whatever your life insurance, you'd have less years of spending in your
Mhm.
volatility buffer. But I think in practical terms, probably targeting 3 to 4 years of volatility buffer
Okay.
in most cases will get you the key benefits. And if you had like 6 or 7 or 8 years, you probably don't necessarily need that much at the end
Like
of
you
the
almost
day.
could be missing out on
Y-
opportunity costs if you had 6, 7, or 8 years of volatility because that could have earned a better rate of return in the
Mhm,
markets.
mhm.
So you're saying 3 to 4 to maybe 5 is the ideal
Is
number.
or at least, yeah, is a pretty reasonable number of you're going to get all the benefits, all of the volatility buffer, and not really miss out on not
Yeah.
having an even bigger
Yes.
volatility buffer.
One thing I know is at anytime you put yourself out there, you write books, you're going to get criticism and pushback. Has there been any pushback that you've gotten from your first book or your academic research when it comes to this that have been really good points where you say, that's a really good point? Or have most people, besides name calling you about insurance, being an insurance salesperson and all, is there been any points that are valid, or have you not really heard from anyone since researching?
Yeah, online there's the investment community will criticize me. I guess one good takeaway I took from it wasn't really politely stated
Yeah,
feedback.
it never
It was rather
is.
impolite, but they thought I was assuming too high of a tax rate for the study. And that was probably the key. Yeah, I mean, if you're a higher net worth person, it would be an appropriate tax rate. But if you're more mass affluent, I think I rarely would have used that high. In one study, I think assumed a 32% tax bracket on their income at the highest levels,
Mhm.
which probably is too high for most retirees. So that was good feedback. And I've cut back these days. On the most recent white paper I looked at, we used, well, this was still pre change in the tax code, but 25%. And I
Okay.
use 22% now with
Okay.
now that 22% is a permanent.
What's the biggest difference in how the numbers shake out by 32% and 22% in your research?
It makes a difference because with the tax benefits of life insurance, it's really the tax rate is going to take a haircut off of what's in their tax deferred accounts because you or your beneficiaries, you have to pay taxes on those distributions. And so
Yep.
if you're paying 32% instead of 22%, you will have less after tax investment wealth.
Okay.
So that would be the impact.
Okay. If you're a high earning professional, entrepreneur, or someone who wants more control of your money, we offer something called a clarity call. It's a one on one conversation where we learn more about your situation and walk you through how integrating whole life insurance could help better your financial situation. It's no pressure or fluff, just real clarity on whether this strategy is right for you. Click the link in the description or tag comment below, and we'll walk you through exactly how we can help you. You have a new book coming out. If you want to
I
show the
do. Oh, yeah,
camera,
yeah. The one and only copy I have right
yeah,
now.
retirement planning guidebook. Talk to me about what that book's about. It's third edition. Talk to me about
Yeah.
what it's about.
So well, it's the fourth book I wrote, but it's the book I was actually always trying to write. And it was really as a matter of writing. This is the book, All Things Retirement, the Retirement Planning Guidebook. As I was writing it, I was writing the chapter on housing. I had it got long enough that my first book was on reverse mortgages. It was going to be the chapter on housing. And now I just summarized that book with the chapter on housing in the retirement planning guidebook. Then using investments for retirement. How much can I spend in retirement was my second book. Chapter 4 is about summarizing how to treat spending from investments in retirement. Then safety first retirement planning was going to be the chapter on using annuities and life insurance and risk pooling and actuarial science. Chapter 5 summarizes safety first retirement planning. And then I cover everything else. So the retirement planning guidebook is really a look at all aspects of retirement.
I love it. All right. So would consumers, should they read this book or just advisors?
Mhm. I intended it to be for consumers
Good.
and advisors, but really what makes the third edition special. So the second edition was 507 pages.
Okay. Yeah.
The third edition is 389
Okay.
pages. I've been working really hard to trim out the excess and to make it more reader friendly. It's not like fluffy or overly
Yes.
easy. You do need to really dedicate yourself to reading it. But I mean for consumers who are serious about retirement to be able to read it and understand it. And
Are you going to have an Audible edition?
that's always been an issue. I may at this point. I do not at this
Okay.
do not, and I'm don't have a specific plan for having it
Okay.
soon, but it is something I'm
We
considering.
will talk offline because I didn't have an Audible for different reasons than probably you. I'm dyslexic, so reading is very difficult for me. And I'll share with you what we do. My self-published book has an Audible version, and it's cool to see that come up alive. So this book is for anybody that wants to be more efficient in retirement. And what would you say? The key outcome would be is it would just be more certainty? Would they come up with the strategy? Would they just have less stigma when it comes to insurance, reverse mortgages, annuities? I see that you talk about Social Security in here. Like, what are some things that people will get in reading this book that they may have never heard or
Well, it's all the key decisions for retirement. So, yeah, Social Security, long-term care, Medicare is a big part of it. The non-financial considerations, everything's in there. What makes the book special, though, is I really am agnostic. So, chapter 1, another thing I've been doing the last few years, working to create. It's called the Retirement Income Style Awareness, or RISA, and it's an assessment I created with Alex Murguia, and it's available to readers of the book. Understand your retirement income style. Are you total returns, time segmentation, income protection, or risk wrap? And I'm agnostic. Total returns is the investment approach, investments only. And there's characteristics. Some people will have an orientation that will make investments only fine for them. They're comfortable relying on market performance. They want as much flexibility for their assets as possible. They're not worried about having predictable income. They're considering more of a variable spending stream. They value the technical liquidity of being able to look at their brokerage account. They really are focused on front loading and enjoying retirement while they can. They're not as worried about this idea that I might be in my 90s and not have anything left. And if you have all these characteristics, an investment approach is fine. So then, okay, focus on chapter 4 about investment-based approaches. On the other hand, if you take that assessment and you find your income protection, that's the classic where we're now talking about there could be a role for annuities and insurance. But I'm really agnostic to the sense of if somebody's total returns, I'm fine. Annuities may not be right for them. There's the annuity puzzle is this idea that why don't more people buy annuities? But if you have these characteristics associated with total returns, it's just not something in your frame of reference, and that's fine. What we find is about 2/3 of the population, though, is looking for some sort of protection or commitment to a strategy that does involve insurance. And if that is who you are, then okay, you focus on chapter 5 as well that talks about how annuities work, the role life insurance can play, and so forth. But really being open to creating the strategy that's going to be right for everyone, considering their preferences and behavioral, and not just saying one approach is best for everyone. So this is not a book that just tells people use insurance or use life insurance. It talks about those tools, and it also talks about when it's appropriate and when it's not appropriate, and then also how to structure an investment-based approach as well.
I love the Google Maps of like concept of this. I think
Yeah,
there's so
yeah.
much that we can learn by just thinking about how GPSs work and calculating where you're at, where you want to go, the different options, the pros and cons. And so I love that idea. How long did it take you to write this third edition? I'm sure it wasn't like from scratch because you already had certain things that you've articulated, but how long did it take you to make this thing happen?
For doing all of the editing to cut down the word length, like I said, cutting out 100 pages, and then also getting all the updates in, especially for the tax legislation in 2025. I had to do major edits to the tax planning chapter to account for our new tax code. I've been pretty much working on this almost full time since early October, so it was really, know, about 3 months to
Okay.
of just every night I'm trying to carefully edit 20 pages multiple times
Wow,
and
you're superhuman.
everything. So
There's most people are working 10 years to get their first book out, and you're but
well,
yeah,
getting the first edition out took much longer than
okay,
that.
okay, that's fair. That's fair. Build
This
build the
was
foundation.
yeah, the book was already in good shape. It was just editing it to make it easier to read and doing the updates for
Cool.
everything that changes in the tax code.
What I now will do, if you're cool, is I'll just give you a rapid fire on some of the talking points that you have in your book, and you can just spit fire. So this will
Okay.
just be rapid fire. If you don't want to answer something, don't. Obviously, say chapter 1 is all about income styles and just figuring out what type of style you are. And there might be some people that do thrive on having all their money and investments. And maybe if that's you, it gives you the freedom to own that, but you also realize that that might not be you and that may be stressing you out.
Right, right.
Number 2, you talk about retirement risk, you have longevity, a sequence of return risk, and then talk about spending shocks and other surprises.
Yeah, yeah. So the three types of retirement risks: longevity, don't know how long you're going to
Yeah.
live; market, anything related to markets; and then spending shocks. These are you can work hard to have a budget. This is how much I want to spend every year. Spending shocks are just when I have to spend more than I anticipated.
Yeah.
So the big ones would be long-term care. That's the most significant
Yeah.
spending shock, and it gets its own chapter. Health related shocks, and then from there, it's a matter of all kinds of so higher inflation rate than you had assumed, just needing to spend more, excess withdrawal rate risk. I need to spend more than I anticipated. Helping adult family members, helping adult children, fraud and theft, elder abuse, all the different things that you need to be thinking about that could force more spending than you anticipated.
Mhm. Chapter number 3 is qualifying goals and assessing preparedness. Do retirement budgets work? Like, do they? I mean, like,
My focus on budgeting is really to understand how much you spent and then try to estimate how much you will spend. And that's going to be an evolving process. I think it can work, but it is something every year. It's like, what do you do in January with the ongoing adjustments in the plan? Look at your spending from the previous year and adjust your retirement budget accordingly to account for what you're learning about your spending over time. But I think it really helps to have a baseline of this is approximately what I'll be looking to spend in retirement. And then we created a funded ratio tool, and that's outside of the book. I talk about it in the book. We have that tool available. We do these retirement income challenges for
hmm,
folks where they get a week long opportunity to learn about retirement, use our tool. And it's trying to assess your fundedness for retirement. Do you have enough retirement assets to meet your spending goals? And
I see.
that's why we're estimating a budget because we want to know, do you have enough to fund that budget
Yeah.
alongside other potential contingencies like a long-term care event and so forth?
See. Uh, Chapter number 4 is all about investments and spending, and this is for people that just want to do investment only, or is this
Well,
chapter for people that want to do investments and potential some other things, as like life insurance, annuities, and reverse
right.
mortgages?
It's for everyone because it's not investments versus insurance. It's really about investments only versus investments and insurance.
I see.
So most every retirement income plan will include a role for spending from investments. And that's where the variable spending strategies, when
Hmm.
it's for discretionary spending, can be important. So chapter 4 is really for everyone. Everyone needs to think about what you're going to spend from the investment
I
piece.
see.
It's just with more insurance-based approaches, you build a floor of reliable income first, and then your spending from investments is for more discretionary
I
goals.
see. You have a whole chapter on annuities. I'm curious. Chapter 6 is on Social Security. What do we need to know about Social Security? I mean, this is part of what you've done a lot of research in this. What are we missing on Social Security that, like, what are most people missing on Social Security that they should know?
That Social Security is an inflation-adjusted, protected lifetime income with survivor benefits. It's the best annuity money can buy in terms of you can compare if I delay from 62 to 70 and think about my lost benefits between 62 and 70. being the premium for an annuity that starts paying at 77% more inflation adjusted income. No commercial annuity can touch that. So for anyone thinking about using annuities in retirement, it's inefficient to claim Social Security at 62 and buy an annuity. Just step one, delay Social Security. And then if you would still like additional reliable income, you can look at annuities to fill that
So
gap.
you're under the opinion that and this is not just an opinion, this is data to say, hey, take take from other sources, delay Social Security because no other financial asset's going to let you grow it at 8%, and then you're going to be better off if you can delay Social Security. So you would be fine if someone more aggressively tapped into other assets because
Uh-huh.
Social Security is going to be more efficient than
Yeah. It's you build a Social Security delay bridge. So you
Okay.
don't want to just take it out of an investment portfolio because that would create more sequence risk. You're taking out an even bigger amount for the first 8 years of retirement, assuming you're 62 to 70 is kind of the example there.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
carve out a bridge. But I show an example in the book where actually, if you carve the bridge out of the portfolio and then you look at, now this is the rest of my spending need, this is the rest of the portfolio after building that bridge, I can actually lower the withdrawal rate throughout retirement by delaying Social Security and carving out a delay bridge. And so then just with a lower withdrawal rate, I have a higher probability of success with all the investment-based metrics.
If you died prematurely, that advice wouldn't age well. What age would you have to live to delay to 67? And does that make sense?
Yeah. The break even, so like, well,
Yeah.
say 62 to 70, the break even age is usually around age 80. It depends on the
Okay.
exact interest rate assumptions, but somewhere between 80 and 84.
Okay.
You'd
Okay.
have to live that long to break even. But keep in mind, for the high earner in a couple, if your surviving spouse, if
You still
you
get
might die at 75,
Yes.
but if you would have been 100 when your spouse dies,
I see. Okay.
that's the number you're looking at there. As long as that number is higher than 80, you benefit from having delayed Social Security.
Cool. Let's talk about Medicare and health insurance. What do we need to know if we really want to be efficient in retirement about the Medicare and health insurance space?
There's a lot of decisions to make there, and most folks will become eligible for Medicare at age 65. The first thing you need to just understand is, in most cases, unless you're still working, there's specific rules. An employer with 20 or more employees, you or your spouse has health insurance through that place where you're actively employed. That's the only way you can really avoid signing up for Medicare without not having any primary insurance in the United States. So understanding that you do need to sign up for Medicare, and then it's really about the decisions you want to make. The TV commercials are all about Medicare Advantage plans. Do you want to go that route, or do you prefer original Medicare, potentially with a comprehensive supplement? Plan G is the comprehensive supplement to get the most insurance value and protection out of Social Security. And then also every year you want to choose your prescription drug coverage. If you're using Medicare for that, you don't have other creditable coverage. So choosing a Part D plan, which is something you can update every year during the open enrollment period.
You have a whole chapter on long-term care. Is there people out there who don't need long-term care?
Yeah, I mean, this gets back to retirement styles a little bit as well. Like, if you can self-fund long-term care, you can potentially do that. Now, there's still reasons to
But it could be
consider
inefficient.
insurance. Yeah, it could be inefficient.
Yeah. I mean,
and also it could be a matter of, a lot of times, just having an insurance policy can help you feel more comfortable getting the care you need. Whereas if you're planning to self-fund, you might worry that you're spending your kid's inheritance and then you
Right.
don't get the care that you need.
I guess a better question would be, how should people think about long-term care? I'm sure you write about this in your book, but do you show people like when they should consider it and when they shouldn't?
Well, yeah, the things to think about, so that you can self-fund or Medicaid if you run out of assets, traditional long-term care insurance, or hybrid policies that can combine long-term care insurance with either life insurance or an annuity. Those are the options out there. And yeah, I talk through, well, the considerations and what might lead someone to want to consider having a policy in place versus self-funding. Or if you don't have a lot of assets, Medicaid is probably going to be an inevitability.
Right.
But most uh, folks who can avoid, if you can avoid going onto Medicaid, you probably will want to, because just with the demographics of, there's fewer and fewer potential caregivers available in the population,
You're
and
not
there's
gonna
going to
get
be
the best
more and more
care.
people needing care. The quality of Medicaid care is going to have to decline at some point.
I see.
And so if you can use insurance or self-funding to avoid Medicaid, you probably want to do that.
Last question from your book is the chapter on tax efficiency in retirement.
Mhm.
What's the cliff notes on that?
Yeah, it's the longest chapter of the book,
Yeah,
and
I
it's the
see.
one I'm kind of most interested in with the research these days. But it's looking at, and I think a lot of the discussion, it's about Roth conversions or realizing long-term capital gains, to harvesting your gains, to especially if you're in a 0% long-term preferential gains bracket. Looking at when to do that, a lot of the Roth conversion conversation out there is way too oversimplified. They just talk about filling up tax brackets. But in the book, I structure how to use the idea of tax maps to understand when I'm generating income, it's not just income tax brackets. There's a lot of other considerations. Am I pushing, if I generate like if I take money from my IRA, generate ordinary income, am I pushing my long-term gains from 0% into 15%? That's called preferential income stacking. Am I causing more of my Social Security to be taxed? That's the Social Security tax torpedo. Am I triggering Medicare premium surcharges? That's IRMA.
Mhm.
Am I triggering the net investment income tax? Am I dealing with the phase out of itemized deductions? Or now there's a new age 65 plus bonus deduction where $6,000 extra per person age 65 plus, but that starts phasing out at $150,000 of adjusted gross or modified adjusted gross income.
Oh,
There's now the SALT
yes,
up
I
to
know.
40,400 this year, but that has a phase. And that's higher income people. It starts phasing out at this year. It's a little over $500,000. But understanding the phase outs of all these types of deductions,
Mhm.
all these things work together. If you're using the Affordable Care Act for health insurance, I also talk a lot about subsidies and the phase out of those subsidies. And now this year, as soon as you hit 400% of the federal poverty line, you don't have any more health insurance subsidies. So talking about the interactions of all these factors, which are all essential to look at when making decisions. Should I do a Roth conversion or
Yeah.
should I harvest long-term capital
Have you
gains?
thought about putting all this into an AI bot and then having someone have a Dr. Wade Phau bot where they could ask questions, not financial advice, but to be like, what would Dr. Wade Phau do in his infinite wisdom
Yeah,
in this?
I think about things like that, and I feel like already AI's been, because I written so much. I feel
Yeah, it's
when I ask
probably
AI questions, I sometimes feel like it's given, like I can use it as a representative of me because I think they've been
love
trained
it.
on my stuff. So
Yeah, that could be a hack at home. Obviously, don't have Dr. Wade Phau be held
They-
accountable, but
oh,
a-
they
you know,
still get a lot wrong too, though.
yes. So make sure to go get this book, Retirement Planning Guidebook. We'll have the link in the description below. And if you do get it, make sure to take 3 minutes after you read it and review it on Amazon. It really, really helps. Just more people see this and it gives a lot more credibility for the work that you've done. Anything that I've not asked or mentioned that you want to make sure to mention on this podcast before we close?
I think that's a great overview. And if you're looking for the book, we were talking about how right now Amazon's still dealing with some link issues. But if, and
We'll
probably you
have the
can put the
link.
URL,
Yeah.
or just use the books2read.com/retirement.
Okay, books2read.com/retirement.
And then if you click from there, you'll have no problem finding
Okay.
the right edition. You won't
Well,
accidentally get the old edition.
we'll have that. We'll make sure that the links in the description or pinned comment is the right one. And Dr. Wade Phau, you're welcome anytime. And thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And thank you for coming back on and having a show with me.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure talking to you again.
Now for the special announcement I promised at the beginning of this episode. We're bringing in America's top tax expert, Ed Slott, as one of our featured speakers at this year's Life Insurance Summit. Ed has spent decades as a TV personality and best-selling author of many books, helping individuals and financial advisors set up advanced tax strategies and navigate complex tax rules. And the cool part is he's going to be sharing his expertise and wisdom around how he views life insurance being integrated and set up. It's going to be incredible.
Most people think of life insurance as something that pays off after you're dead. That's true. But what if I told you that you could have tax-free access to your life insurance during your lifetime, so you could use it for yourself?
And what I'm really excited about is instead of just doing like a 20 or 30-minute talk, he's doing an in-person 90-minute masterclass for all of the attendees. So if you're an advisor or someone who just wants to get more clarity or control over your financial future, you're not going to want to miss this year's summit and Ed's talk. Make sure you grab your tickets down below before they sell out. Can't wait to see you in person in June.